Hi everyone! I finally managed to get the editing done on this episode with a breastfeeding baby on my lap the whole time. And that's why it took a bit longer than usual to get this episode out. Bear with me, I'm slowly but surely getting the hang of this extreme multitasking lifestyle. Oh, and please excuse any baby-related noises you may hear in this intro. Also, keep in mind that this was recorded like almost 2 weeks ago, and if there are any recent developments we haven't discussed here, it's probably because of that. I thought it was extremely important to host a discussion on the tragic anti-Muslim terror attack in Christchurch, especially in light of the kinds of talking points I see coming from and being excused in the rational skeptic atheist scene, where even though I knew it was bad, I still honestly have been appalled watching the excuses unfold over the past couple of weeks. The whataboutery and the priorities on display. It's all been really, really eye-opening that so many of these so-called humanists couldn't even wait for a few days to pass before asserting that Islamophobia isn't a real thing, or it's not racist to criticize Islam because Muslims aren't a race. Checkmate, liberals. I mean, within this scene, there's just been such little concern or sensitivity for the victims of a brutal mass murder, and these are the same people I stood shoulder to shoulder with in calling out many whataboutists after Islamist attacks. I had expected better from a group that was so quick to recognize the distastefulness of this when the attack was committed by the quote-unquote other. I expected some level of consistency, at least, but there is none. And Islam certainly doesn't deserve to be shielded from valid criticism. But time and place should also be considered. This should go without saying, really. It's as ridiculous and insensitive as launching into but actually type criticisms of circumcision in the Jewish community right after an attack on a synagogue. It's not that there isn't valid criticism, it's that that might not be the appropriate time for it. It shouldn't have to be spelled out for self-professed rationals that perhaps the days after 50 Muslims have been gunned down for nothing other than their faith, maybe, just maybe, that isn't the time to use your Islam is hate hashtags or be pedantic about the imperfect term Islamophobia or insist that attacks like these shouldn't stop us from criticizing Islam. I mean, I'm a critic of Islam myself, but I feel like I've been silenced to quite an extent by the toxicity of the discussion around it. The frothing at the mouth generalizations and simplistic, reductive, and dangerous screeching about how Islam is worse than Nazism have made it hard to have a sensible discussion around the topic. It's been an incredibly lonely tightrope to walk with very few allies. I don't want my voice to be hijacked by glorifiers of religious conservatism or by anti-Muslim bigots, and it feels impossible to say much without that happening. The hypocrisy on display has been jaw-dropping, really. Someone like Majid Nawaz, who coined the term Voldemort effect to describe when people refuse to name and shame Islamist ideology, has been tweeting at people who are rightfully naming and shaming white supremacist ideology, asking them how it's helpful to list and point at white supremacist attacks. So many of those who pointed at ideology and hateful rhetoric by preachers in the role of Islamism have been unable to apply this to white supremacy or racist anti-Muslimness. They can't even see white supremacy as a coherent ideology where the blame extends anywhere beyond the self-professed Richard Spencer types, when in fact this is a problem that spreads outwards to all the people who soften, make excuses for, downplay, or share reactionary talking points with the shooter whose manifesto was titled The Great Replacement. Merely denouncing this terrorist doesn't mean you aren't contributing to that ideology. I'm sure there are Islamist hate preachers who denounce jihadist attacks, but that doesn't mean they aren't part of the problem. Let's go back to that notorious conversation between Ben Affleck and Sam Harris on Real Time for a second. I defended Sam and Bill's right to have that conversation without being immediately labeled racist, though in retrospect I completely question their motivations in regards to Islam in light of all the other things I've observed since, but that's a whole other conversation. Anyway, in that chat with Ben Affleck, Sam talked about these concentric circles, where he named and shamed, rightfully so, jihadists, Islamists, and then even conservative Muslims with bigoted overlapping beliefs.
Just imagine some concentric circles here. You have at the center, you have jihadists. These are people who wake up in the morning wanting to kill apostates, wanting to die trying. They believe in paradise. They believe in martyrdom. Outside of them, we have Islamists. These are people who are just as convinced of martyrdom and paradise and wanting to foist their religion on the rest of humanity, but they want to work within the system. They're not going to blow themselves up on a bus. They want to change governments. They want to use democracy against itself. But outside of that circle, you have conservative Muslims who can honestly look at ISIS and say that does not represent us. We're horrified by that. But they hold views about human rights and about women, about homosexuals that are deeply troubling. So these are not Islamists. They're not jihadists.
So just like that then, apply those concentric circles to white supremacy. The terrorists in the inner circle, the self-professed white supremacists and white nationalists like Richard Spencer in the next circle, and then perhaps edgy YouTubers and IDWers who talk about the Great Replacement in a euphemistic way or fearmonger about immigrants and casually discuss race and IQ. Those who routinely downplay the threat of white supremacist extremism and exaggerate and fixate on the threat of college SJWs in the face of all this. Why is it that so many who grasp, or even those who preach this idea of concentric circles when it comes to Islamism, have trouble understanding it when it comes to racist, anti-Muslim, or white supremacist ideology? Something to think about. On Twitter, Sam has been scrambling to distance himself from ridiculous false statistics about Muslim birth rates that he put out over a decade ago, claiming France could become a Muslim-majority country in 25 years, and that was if Muslim immigration were to stop immediately. He referred to demographic trends regarding Muslim birth rates as ominous, which I'm sure anyone interested in good faith discussions on Islam can agree is not mere criticism of religion. And we're halfway through that 25-year time period now, and the spooky Muslim population is still well under 10%. So anyway, he's been tying himself into knots trying to explain this and blame shift, instead of taking it as an opportunity for some introspection and owning it. Maybe say, yeah, that was not a great thing to say. I'd have a lot more respect for him if he did. So many of us have had bad takes, but evolving in the face of evidence to the contrary is key, not doubling and tripling down. But the thing is, he hasn't changed or evolved much from the time he was using a crazy conspiracy book as a legit source to fearmonger about Muslim birth rates. His fascination and appreciation for anti-immigrant stuff is present to this day in the form of his love for Douglas Murray, who thinks London is no longer white enough. Sam's own cringeworthy conversation with Douglas about the migrant crisis is called On the Maintenance of Civilization. For fuck's sake. He's positively shared conversations about Muslim immigration featuring people like Anne-Marie Waters before. She was too racist for UKIP. His views on Muslim immigrants and his appreciation for those who hate them was really the beginning of my own realization that what Sam was interested in was far beyond reasonable criticisms of Islam. It's been incredibly disappointing to see all this. Anti-Muslim bigotry has seemed so personal and so urgent in this Trumpian era, and it's just getting worse and worse. After this attack, there is so much fear being felt in Muslim communities around the world. People are constantly worried about their loved ones who go to mosque. I know I am. People are worried about their loved ones who are visibly Muslim, or just brown even. These are scary, scary times for people who can't help but look a certain way or be perceived a certain way. And something I wish the ex-Muslims who are fine with Rebel Media and Breitbart talking points would realize is that no attacker will stop and ask about your level of religiosity or lack thereof. This hateful rhetoric can come for any of us, no matter how far behind we've left Islam. Even those who've never been Muslim, as we've seen Hindus and Sikhs be attacked by anti-Muslims as well. No attacker will care for your, but actually, Islam is not a race stuff from 2014, in a time where Muslims are obviously being highly racialized. I feel we here in the rational skeptic atheist sphere have a particular responsibility to be careful, since for so many, criticism of Islam is indeed a gateway to the far or alt-right. It's the beginning of a common cause with such people. It's important that we understand the extent of the ideology behind this kind of attack and what three-letter acronym pseudo-intellectual groups also have a hand in a softer radicalization of online communities and in normalizing or sanitizing fringe figures with their connections to people like Molyneux or Lawrence Southern, and their very mild framing of them or censoring criticism of them or nodding along to them. Now, in terms of this upcoming episode, I decided to have YouTubers from New Zealand on because YouTube is a major radicalizer too, and very relevant to this horrific, made for social media, live streamed meme mass murder. I mean, so terrifying that that's a thing. But YouTube is a landscape I'm not as familiar with, so I thought it'd be helpful to have them talk us through that region of the internet. There's just so much to say on this topic that even though we covered a lot of ground, we couldn't cover everything. I hope, though, that you find it a useful and interesting conversation. And as always, if you enjoy the show and my perspective, please consider supporting it via Patreon. Without listeners like you, I really can't keep this show going. So thank you to those who do make this possible. Now, the episode.
Make sure that that program doesn't contain controversial subjects and you're not impolite to people.
No, definitely not, Dad. You know me. I'm never, ever controversial or impolite.
Yeah. Okay.
Welcome to Conversations with your lovable, never pisses anyone off, ex-Muslim host Aina, keeping it non-controversial. Welcome to Panel 18. Today I'm joined by Tim Blake and Nick Moa, both YouTubers from New Zealand, and sadly it isn't a happy topic we've come together to chat about. We'll be discussing the recent horrific anti-Muslim terrorist attack in Christchurch, as well as the internet culture that surrounds it and the responses we've been seeing online and related news stories. I'll link to their YouTubes in the show notes, and you can follow Tim on Twitter at TOMOTAMVOTIR. Tomotim voter. Okay. And Nick, you can follow Nick at
Moa Videos. So just MOA Videos.
Nice and simple. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you guys for joining me. I mean, it's been quite something to speak to you guys on the other side of the world. It's like 1:45 a.m. here. And we managed to get together. Yay, online.
Yeah,
huzzah. But it's been quite something watching this all unfold online, and I can't imagine what it must be like for you guys to be in New Zealand and see all this around you. Like, what's it been like?
Well, we were talking just offline a moment ago about, like, I don't pay enough attention to New Zealand, and I think Nick knows that about me too. I'm always just sticking my nose into things happening in America, and that's always what I'm really paying attention to. And the reason for that, I think, is because you just take New Zealand for granted, because you just assume that the things that are going to go on in this country are kind of a little bit small fry. Like, obviously they matter to the people involved, and they matter to other people in this country. But I've been very fixated on American politics and things happening overseas, that when this happened, like, my wife actually said to me, finally, you've got a reason to care about New Zealand. And
ouch.
Yikes.
She's kind of right about that, because I guess I just assumed that everything's going to go sort of okay here. That the things happening overseas are so intense, like with
and it's a pretty peaceful country, right? Like, you don't hear about this kind of thing.
It's almost a running joke. Like, what people know about New Zealand is rugby, sheep, Lord of the Rings. Mm-hmm. And if you follow Twitter, you'll see on your timeline some tweets, which is almost like you kind of feel, that's New Zealand's just a little bit shit. world tours stop at Sydney. Like, Amazon, you can't take $70 for shipping. It's not a.
Was it IKEA recently that did a world map that they forgot to put New Zealand in or something?
Yes,
exactly.
And that's what I'm like with New Zealand and politics. I just kind of forget about us. Like, I will see tweets and news about stuff that's happening in this country and be like, well, that's interesting, or that person said a stupid thing, or that's kind of fucked up. Anyways, and then I'll just tweet like Donald Trump and blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
There's this sort of part about New Zealand's intellectual, or part of our national psyche, and it's called The Man Alone. It's this John Mulgan novel, and it's this kind of, it sees Kiwis as being almost these white New Zealanders as being sort of away from the world and looking out at the world, kind of a bit in a sort of lonely way. And it's the sort of the way New Zealanders look at the world. We're like, look at all this crazy shit that's happening. That won't happen here. It's just kind of like this feeling of sort of like, oh God, the worst thing could be that, oh God, they'll discover we exist. And so there's a sort of, I guess, I don't want to say complacency, but there's this feeling that, well, it'll never happen here. We're inoculated from all of that crazy far right nonsense, aren't we? And then bang, 50 people die, and that's been beyond shocking. And then you think about like the sort of things Tim touched on about how, okay, so we're online and we're having at it all the time with all of these shitlord types who think that the end of Western civilization is happening because their favorite Canadian speaker, blah, blah, blah. And we don't realize that those other people are in that headset too, and they could be anywhere in the world, and some of them are in New Zealand.
Yeah, like the internet fear culture is global. Like, it's a global culture, which you can't see because people are not saying like, I'm a New Zealander and I think Muslims are like going to invade us and they're going to destroy all of us. Like, you don't hear about it because people, they're in their bedrooms, posting on forums, doing whatever they're doing. And there's also been news that like the powers that be here have not really been following that sort of rhetoric. Like, they just haven't paid any attention to it at all.
Because they've suffered that complacency too. Like there's this, we're just New Zealand. No one's our enemy.
This idea of New Zealand being such a perfect place is kind of a stereotype. It's not really particularly true. Like, for example, we have extremely high wealth inequality. It's actually like one of the highest wealth inequalities in the entire world. We've got a huge racial inequality. We've got a lot of problems with like domestic abuse. We've got a high suicide rate. We've got a lot of problems with like drug abuse and alcoholism, and we've got gangs. We've got a lot of problems. Yeah. But it's just this image that we are such like a safe, country that's like a paradise. Like, I think you said earlier, like it's like a paradise over there, and it's really not. Like, it really depends who you are and where you live. I think.
And I kind of relate to that as a Canadian too, because we kind of have that image as well, that nothing really bad happens here. There's no racism here. Meanwhile, like, the Trumpism effect is really, like, you can really like feel it here.
Well, most of these demagogues are Canadian.
Yeah. Yes, I know. I'm very sorry.
I want to ask you about that. It's like, why is that? Everyone's always asking about that. Why are they always Canadian?
I don't know. I think maybe it's like a reaction to the general progressivism. I don't know.
It's like, you guys think Canada is so great? We'll show you. We're not so good.
We have a ton of them. Yeah, there's like Molyneux. There's Lauren Southern. Peterson is ours. We have Gad Saad. We have Tarek Fatah. We have
Faith Goldie.
Oh, yes, we have Faith Goldie.
This guy who came into the country, the terrorist, capital T, he entered the country with this idea of this conception of what this country was, and what it, and how it fits into this narrative of Western civilization. And he didn't know anything about our history or anything about what makes this country unique or independent. He just thought, well, this is a white country. This is the West. There is some Muslims, and it's it's actually really sad to think that about my country that I live in, that there are people who just, they don't feel connected, that connection, that the complete lack of what they would say, what Māori would say, this connection to the whenua. And that's just my, it means, like, so in the country Tim and I live, there's this phrase tangata whenua, which is used to describe their indigenous population. It literally means people of the land. And it's this idea of having a connection to the land. And you don't have to be Māori to have a connection to the land. But you kind of have to feel it,
Yeah.
And the fact that this has really opened my eyes up. It's a real shocking kind of, I guess when we sort of take stock of this later as Kiwis, we're going to have to start thinking about, well, there's just this big internet morass of what, of West and because we all speak the English language, we're all speaking the same weird culture war political discourse. There's nothing regional about it.
Yeah.
And
it's the region of the internet.
Yeah, and I've heard someone describe it as a new continent. The internet is a new continent.
Oh, that's depressing, yeah.
Yeah.
It kind of is, right? As we become, like, more and more globally connected, we have, like, the same, I guess, culture wars, in each different country, like, they're fighting the same battles. Like, some British YouTuber, right-wing YouTuber, is going to feel connected with Jordan Peterson, who's Canadian, but there isn't that geographical divide, you know what I mean? They're on the same side, whereas all the SJWs are on the other side.
Right. But that's just exactly like this terrorist has got this. He's managed to find himself into a cluster of sociopathic predator trolls, and they've all congregated in their end of wherever that is of the web, and it's so everyone's kind of, it's almost this kind of virtual regionalization. We had it's bonkers.
To the white supremacist, the way that he would see it is that it's a civilizational war between white people and Muslims, and he doesn't care about the particular history of any country or like how white people
never
got
do.
there. No. I think when it's like when they say blood and soil, like the soil part of it is like dominating the land. He just wants it so white people just dominate everything in this country, and there's no other races, and that's kind of it. Like it's the white blood, and it's our soil, and we just claim it and take it, and we don't care about the context of the country or the history or the fact that Maori people were here first, and it was actually a story of colonialism. He doesn't
but
care
even
about
in the
that.
States, you see that like there's like ignorant assholes that tell Native Americans to go back where they came from.
Oh, that's got to be the worst. That's got to be the worst.
Yeah,
I can't even imagine how shitty that must feel.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the thing. It's that, I think it's a global war, and they can wage a global war through the internet because they can try to create this sense of solidarity between all white people, and the solidarity point is their hatred of not white people and desire to destroy anyone who's not white, and they can do it through the internet.
Well, I mean, because this is the sort of I guess the narrative that we're sort of getting to. It's this kind of where does New Zealand fit into this, and radicalization on the internet. And like, so I tweeted yesterday about how Jordan Peterson, how a bookshop in New Zealand has taken a Jordan Peterson, or has chosen not to restock a Jordan Peterson book.
Yes, it's the end of civilization.
And now we're North Korea now.
Yeah.
And now we're North Korea.
You have Sharia law, basically.
I don't necessarily agree with that decision. I think that was just maybe a bit knee-jerk on the half of the person doing it. Everyone's a bit anxious at the moment. This is a bit of an anxious time.
But I mean, don't you think a bookshop has the right to decide what books it stocks?
But this is the point. The people who are making it, I mean, I feel a bit guilty tweeting about it because I knew that the people who would make hay of it wouldn't be New Zealanders. I mean, some New Zealanders have, but they don't see that, well, there are other bookshops here. They don't see that, well, there are New Zealand authors who might not be stocked and maybe they should take precedence, They don't see any of that. They just see their man being removed. They can't see the forest for the trees,
Yeah.
And this is very, people who are extremely online are like this. They're so into these things that when these things get messed with, they don't realize how small they are.
But it's funny because these are the find another baker types, right? Like when a bakery refuses to serve a gay person based on their orientation, they will argue that they should have the right not to serve them. But when it comes to not restocking Jordan Peterson's book, it's the end of civilization.
And what is the inverse to crying foul like that is making it compulsory to stop Jordan Peterson.
Right, exactly.
What are you asking for here, you know?
Yeah, it's absurd. Yeah, so this is what I was asking you, like, what kinds of responses have you seen? And it seems like your country is taking a lot of, like, swift actions. Like, you know, semi-automatic weapons have been banned, and that is just something that I'm sure a lot of Americans are looking at and thinking, like, wow, that happened fast. Like, how long have we been asking for something like this, you know?
Well, that's the thing that's very surreal about it. You know, as a country which is generally not talked about internationally, it's like all of these people who I follow and I see their dumb shit arguments constantly about America and other countries in the Middle East. All of a sudden, all of them are talking about New Zealand, and they're all taking all of these narratives and taking the same style of talking point that they always use and putting
they don't know shit about New Zealand.
And putting it onto this country, and all of a sudden they're like, you know, this country's totalitarian and it's North Korea and there's no freedom of speech. But I can't speak to this personally because I don't watch like New Zealand television. But my wife told me about it. She was like,
no one does.
She was
really?
like,
No
you know,
one does?
My wife does. That's why I'm bringing her up, because she watches all this stuff. She was saying that basically everybody on TV right now is just talking about, you know, solidarity with the Muslim community and like, how could this happen here? We have to do something and we have to act, and this is the worst thing that's ever happened, and we have to show love. We've got to show aroha, and like basically everyone's getting teary-eyed on every television show, like in this entire country. And even the opposition party, National, was saying we've got to come together. We've got to, normally like they're just a bunch of like complete shitheads, but they're like, we've got to come together. We've got to do something. Like, we agree with Jacinda Ardern's ideas on guns. The only person being a bastard is David Seymour from ACT, who's basically he's basically just said, you know, if we pass something about guns in 3 weeks, that's not a democratic process, and it goes against like the procedure. So he's just pulling the old, like, you know, Republican talking point.
Yeah, so just some context for the listeners. So New Zealand has this political system where we have this one little party called ACT, who are the Libertarian Party, and there's one member in that party.
He's like the only guy who's guys, come on.
And the main centre-right party, National, give him that seat basically, just almost so that they can get political cover for maybe some, if they want to do something like charter schools or something, it can be a ACT Party initiative, and then they can wipe their hands off it if it doesn't work. It's pretty simple, really. But this guy, but it's interesting because we have the Jacinda Ardern, who's quite well loved, quite well liked. There's a lot of good feeling towards her in this country, more or less. She's not an incompetent person. You might disagree with her, but I don't think she's her authenticity isn't doubted. I don't generally think, but I know that she's done quite well with this. She's been very smart with the way she's brought the country together, and it's really fascinating watching right-wing commentators. Have you heard of Matthew Hooton, Tim? Do you follow him?
No.
He's one of these kind of I guess really right-wing kind of operators, like sort of like, if you want to see what's the hard edge right of New Zealand, it's this guy.
In terms of our country or in terms of the world?
Well, I'll give you an example. So the title of his column this week, I'll bring it up and see if I can link it. It was basically saying Jacinda Ardern has the empathy of Reagan after the Challenger disaster.
I saw that.
And the steely resolve of Thatcher after the Brighton bombing. And it's like, wow, he's basically calling her God Queen.
And you guys don't have anything that's like Breitbart or Rebel Media over there?
Yeah, we do. We have this. We have a particularly noxious website which has influenced our politics. But the guy who runs it recently had a stroke and a mental breakdown, I think. So it's I don't know where that is. But
we also have Brian Tamaki, who's quite notorious.
The church guy. Yeah,
right-wing preacher. But every now and then he comes out and says something that's so bigoted that it makes international news.
Oh, wow.
Occasionally he'll be like, homosexuals are parasites or something. Like, okay, thanks, Brian.
But what sort of political power does he wield though? Who does he?
Well, not much. But we were just trying to brainstorm, people who are kind of like in the American or I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. No, he is, because he's prosperity theology, isn't he? So he's that really hardline American.
Yeah, and his big thing is just hating gay people. That's what he's really all about. He probably he hates everyone else too, though. So he probably hates Muslims.
There you go.
No.
Yeah, so maybe that's something. Yeah. But
but also, I saw that you guys they're very fringe. Well, that's good. We've seen our rebel media types become louder and louder over here, so that's been quite scary to see.
Is there more than just rebel media, or is it?
Well, there's Sun News. Which is awful.
Oh, Sun. Oh, God. Yeah. Jesus.
But 4chan and 8chan banned now, right? Like,
well, the ISPs have I believe there's a selection of sites which ISPs they just sat down in a meeting and said, okay, these are the sites, and they've just removed them, blocked them, but anyone can get around them. It's the internet, but it's an interesting gesture, and something interesting about I want to just say about our what makes New Zealand politics different from other English-speaking countries is while our media might be not the best, it's actually kind of shit. Our media is shit. It isn't a Murdoch press, and that's an interesting distinction. It doesn't have Murdoch in here, and I think that means that there's a lot more breathing space for saner political debate, and without like a real malicious kind of just that kind of nastiness that emanates from whenever there's a Fox or a news of the world kind of thing running amok.
I think the thing about most commentary in this country is it's incredibly banal and just not of much interest, like, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah. That's probably
I'm not much
good,
interest
though.
in you. Now they're all trying to emulate these culture warriors. Now they're all like, and it's funny because I took a break from Twitter for a while, for like a year, and I came back, and all these like New Zealand people are retweeting Paul Joseph Watson and talking about this Peterson, blah blah blah. All of a sudden, that whole tendency has started capturing the minds of our commentariat. Do you know? And
oh my God. Like, I went to my friend's house like a month or two ago, and he was like, hey, just been watching some YouTube. Like, you got to check out this guy. Like, he's so interesting. And then he put on Jordan Peterson. I was like, are you serious? Oh my God. I've known this guy.
Who was this?
Real life friends? Like
real life friend from high school.
That's worrying. I haven't come across a real life person that likes Jordan Peterson. Otherwise, I'd be very concerned for them.
He's not. He loves Joe Rogan. So
Joe Rogan's incredibly popular. I think Joe Rogan's pretty mainstream as far as these people go away.
Yeah, he's definitely one of the lighter ones, but he certainly has some weird shit going on in his show that, like, people spout all kinds of
he certainly has a preferred kind of guest, doesn't he? Like,
definitely right-leaning, and he's very soft on them. And there was a great article that I tweeted today. I think it was I forget what publication it was in already. I think it was maybe Slate. But they really dive into this whole, like, IDW, grifter mentality and the slipperiness around it. So I'll link that to in the notes.
With Joe Rogan and stuff, and what was going on with my friend, I think that is a good example of the way it works, which is basically that people who are like fans of Joe Rogan and fans of like these different sorts of shows, maybe it's even like Bill Maher or something like that, who've never heard of like Milo Yiannopoulos or Jordan Peterson, like they will go on those shows, and then people like my friend, who I think is like, he's a pretty intelligent guy and like he's fairly savvy in other contexts, we'll just be like, who is this guy? This is very interesting. Like, I want to find out more about this.
Yeah, so they lend them some credibility, right?
Yeah, like my friend hasn't been like radicalized or anything, but I can just see how that could be like a kind of funnel into more extreme.
Funnel is a good word.
There's definitely like an online radicalization, right? And
there is a cascade.
The meme trolling kind of aspect of this guy's manifesto. Do you guys want to talk about that a bit? Like, there was the hand gesture that he did. and the shout out to PewDiePie, subscribe to PewDiePie.
Yeah.
Now, to someone who isn't like steeped in this stuff, like this means nothing. Like, you know, it's just a.
Yeah, it's interesting when people are saying with this particular this incident, people are saying that you're giving the terrorist what they want for something. I don't know, but they always say,
a lot. People keep saying that to me.
Yeah, I don't know what you mean when giving. For some reason this has become a meme, giving the terrorists what they want.
If you discuss if you discuss how they may have been radicalized and what kinds of talking points that may have radicalized them, then of course you're giving the terrorist what he wants, because
I mean, to some extent, like the terrorist will get what he wants by shooting 50 people, because people will notice.
He wants to terrorize people, right?
I just noticed.
He wanted to kill 50 people. That's what he wanted.
I just noticed that this guy shot 50 people. I guess I'm doing what he wants by noticing. You know?
And so people will be horrified and scared and talk about it, and so to some extent, I guess he will.
But tell me,
they're saying like, don't notice if when someone shoots 50 people, just to pretend that nothing happened and just walk off and be like, okay.
But your prime minister refused to say his name, right, and said she would never say his name. So I think that's good, because when they glorify them or put them on the cover of Rolling Stone or whatever, you know, that's never.
Yeah, I've only said the shooter or the terrorist or the killer. That's the only.
The kinds of stuff that people say about Islam would probably not be tolerated if people were saying about Judaism, right? So
I think that's one of the things, the tipping points in this particular tragedy maybe, is that this is why people like Jordan Peterson having his arm around this guy in the photograph saying he's a proud Islamophobe.
Right, there's that photo that's been circulating, and that's from New Zealand too, right? So can you describe the photo?
So there's a photo which someone uncovered that was actually on the site of the people that was promoting Jordan Peterson's tour of New Zealand, and it was one of those photo ops where you pay money to have some Jordan Peterson put his arm around your shoulder or whatever. And there's a guy who has a T-shirt saying, "I'm a proud Islamophobe," and it's really damning on Jordan Peterson, because what kind of a person would actually not just be taking a photo with, but actually have their arm around someone saying, "I'm a proud Islamophobe."
But I already know the defense. The defense is that Islamophobe is a made-up fake word. And it's made up in order to stop people from criticizing Islam. So I think, when Jordan Peterson sees a guy like that, he just thinks, oh, this is a good chance to, make the point that Islamophobe is not a real word or something like that.
Excellent Jordan Peterson voice there.
Yeah, I wasn't even trying to.
Practice.
No, but okay, so this isn't even his first photo that's kind of like this. He's got this photo with a known white nationalist in a MAGA hat, and he's holding they're holding the Pepe flag, or
that's the meme. That's the whole. It's just a meme, bro. Thing.
Yeah,
and that's kind of.
I forget if it's a Pepe flag or a Kekistan flag. One of the two.
That's why the white supremacists have gravitated to PewDiePie, because he's so steeped in meme culture that they just think they can hide in plain sight. And based on his reactions to being accused of doing things related to white supremacy, his reaction is always just to attack the media. And I think that sends a message to white supremacists, he doesn't really have a problem with our beliefs or us. He has to put up a front, he's sorry about stuff, but then he just doubles down and triples down that the media is making him look bad, so he's not going to go against us. And I think because his audience is so mammoth and so massive, that you can have parts of his audience are growing like that, and then being
he's a YouTuber, right? What kind of can you talk about him? What he is, just for the listeners? Yeah, what's his channel like?
Well, when I watch his stuff, it's basically just that and this is, I guess, is the whole defense. He just makes light of just life. He just makes fun of everything. He'll just do stupid things and pranks and play games. And just his content is very lowest common denominator, which I guess is why it's so successful. But his videos are just very much looking at memes, joking, being silly. But, it's extremely, he did this video where he was ordering online, people doing different things. So you can order somebody doing something. So one of the things that he ordered...
Fiverr.com.
Is that what it is? Yeah. One of the things that he ordered was he wanted some people to hold up a sign that said "Death to all Jews" and subscribe to Keemstar. And the joke there was that this would make Keemstar look bad. So then he bought this from them.
And who's Keemstar?
Just another YouTuber.
Okay, just making sure that we explain the context for...
Right, yeah. And so he bought this, and then, you know, they were dancing around. It was like some African people. And then they pulled out the sign, "Death to all Jews," subscribe to Keemstar. And PewDiePie was like shocked, like, oh my God. And then he said, I didn't expect them to do that. Like, I didn't expect them. Oh my God. I'm sorry, guys. I did not expect this. And I thought that was the worst excuse I've ever heard.
And then
you
he's
didn't
also
expect
said
them
the
to do the thing
N-word?
you paid them to do? Like, what?
He's also said the N-word, right?
Oh yeah, when he's streaming and playing games, he shot a guy and he was like, he's an N-word, goddamn N-words or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a heated gaming moment. Gaming makes you say the N-word.
Right, I've heard it. The gamer word.
The defense of him is that he's just a shitlord, he's just memeing, everything's just jokes. But I think the problem is that it sends a signal to white supremacists that when he says some shit that white supremacists like, and then the media has a go at him about it, he just attacks the media. That's his response every single time. You know, he doesn't repudiate the actual beliefs. He says, I'm not with those people. Also, the goddamn media are liars. And that's what he says every single time.
I've only seen him for the first time today, funnily enough, not very long before I logged in to chat with you two. And so my very first PewDiePie experience video was him talking about his favorite author. And it was Yukio Mishima. And I don't know if you guys are aware who... Yeah, did you know? Yeah,
yeah, hard right fascist.
So he's got this video, and it's a little book club, and he's talking about Yukio Mishima, who is a Japanese, basically fascist. He's a good author, actually. I mean, there's a really good film which I recommend. Mishima.
I was just about to say that. I know this is probably problematic, but he's actually a really good writer.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's why it's a perfectly good enough sort of thing to broach on a YouTube channel. I mean, if that's your favorite author, it is. It was just really strange in light of this to see that pop up. But then there's this thing where he talks about how basically, if you aren't aware of Yukio Mishima, he has an interesting body of work, but also his personal life was very interesting. As well as being a big novelist and playwright, he also had his own little paramilitary group, and he killed himself by ritual suicide after kidnapping or holding hostage a member of the Japanese cabinet in 1975. And
also he was homosexual as well.
He was a bit of a repressed. That's why it's really interesting.
His first book is about living with the shame of being gay. It's quite fascinating.
And it's quite, and that's why I really recommend the film as well, because it goes right into that. And I think, but what's interesting is the way PewDiePie sort of characterizes it in his video, and he's talking about how when Mishima did this ritual suicide, he did the speech in front of the soldiers from his balcony, and he realized that they weren't going to necessarily listen to him, but it was better to die like this than have done nothing at all. And I was thinking, wow, that's fucking a deep thing to say for a video game YouTube channel.
Mm-hmm. So you can kind of see like
I don't
why
think that is deep though. That's just being a shitlord.
Well, yeah, but then you look at all the comments underneath, and you see people recommend. You see all these people with Sam Hyde avatars recommending Julius Evola books, and and you're like, what? And you realize, wow, this is like what? Wow, who are these people who are going? So you go from PewDiePie to Julius Evola in in like one click, basically. And Julius Evola is the fascist philosopher, basically. So it's fascinating.
Well, I saw today, because at 1:32 p.m. today we had 2 minutes of silence, because it's been a week since the shooting, and so we had this moment of silence for like the week. I don't know, what do you call it? Anniversary? That sounds too happy, but
well, no, they have death anniversaries too, right?
Yeah. Well, so there was a tweet about that. And all of them were like, wow, New Zealand's an amazing place. Like, New Zealand's fantastic. What an amazing country. And then I saw one that said, subscribe to PewDiePie. And the username was...
So gross.
I don't know how to say this, Deuce Volt.
Oh,
They is
Whatever, you know, the Crusader thing. And I was like, oh my God, like, how fucking extreme are the people saying
But that's
subscribe
like people
to
who do that funny hand gesture and say subscribe to PewDiePie now.
yeah, it's that okay
They can't do it now,
right?
you know. You can't really do that now.
Yeah,
But it's like you look at the usernames, you click on the profiles and you go and you see the kind of shit they tweet about, and it's just horrific.
Yeah.
And you're like, whoa, and they're saying subscribe to PewDiePie. Like, I can't say that, you know, PewDiePie caused the shooting. That's the whole straw man about the whole thing. But I can say that this sort of infestation of his fan base with extreme radicals is happening right in front of his eyes. And I feel like, you know, I feel like he should do something about that. And for that, I'm just being incredibly unfair. Anyways.
Yeah, I mean, when the shooter says subscribe to your channel, you'd think that would alarm you and make you put out messages that would put the far right off of you. But I don't think I've seen anything like that. In fact, in the days after the shooting, he put a tweet out which was thanking people for getting him over 90 million subscribers or something.
Yeah, that's a bit
great timing.
He's got more followers than the population of Germany. You know,
That's insane. The amount of influence that he must have, right?
But that's the issue. Like he's got this shitloading. Never like you can apologize, but never be apologetic. Like never bow down. Just say that you're sorry, just for the sake of saying sorry, and then get on with your shit and attack the media thing going. But at the same time, he's also very ignorant and bungling, and he's just very unaware. And it's conceivable.
And that's so dangerous for someone like that to have that much power and that much influence.
Yeah, like it's conceivable that wasn't malicious and that he's just such a clueless clown that he's like, oh, I'm going to celebrate my subscriber count today.
Why would you do that after like a mass murderer has said subscribe to PewDiePie before shooting 50 people?
Well, because you're not part of it. You're in your bedroom and where he lives in Brighton or London or something. He's not. It's just like anyone who has these fantastical reckons about New Zealand. He can detach himself from it and, you know, have dinner with his girlfriend or whatever. I mean, this is the world we live. You know, you can log off. You know, and I don't know.
Also,
I don't know.
He's been consumed with competing with this other Bollywood-based or like Indian-based channel called T-Series. And he's just been obsessed with trying to get more subscribers than T-Series.
But this is where it falls into this far-right stuff, is because it's been categorized as some kind of political argument that what he's doing is he's fighting for the very soul of YouTube by making content on his own terms. There's a certain kind of, it's not just competing for content, not competing for subscriptions. It's turned into an actual, almost like a political situation. You know, that's why even Peterson himself has said subscribe to PewDiePie. Like, it's like some kind of,
there's such a weird like web of connectivity between all these figures, right? Like it's not for no reason that the bookstore in New Zealand decided not to carry.
I'm quite interested in what it means to be
or restock
alt-right adjacent.
Right, which people like to deny is a thing, but I mean,
well, this is when you say like, so even if we sort of take, I mean, I don't even like even really talking much about Jordan Peterson anymore, to be honest. But even if we take someone like his words at face value and have good faith in what he's saying, that he situates himself and he in a place where he's trying to de-radicalize angry young men, or there is a particular pitch he has. It's so
amazing to me that he says he's trying to de-radicalize people when he's doing the exact opposite.
Well, this is what even if you are to
what are you going to do? How are you going to do that when you're holding up Pepe flags with white nationalists?
Yeah, exactly. I think like he's put himself in a kind of a space where if you're the one who's going to be placing yourself in that space where you're talking to people to de-radicalize them, you might actually have to acknowledge that it's a two-way bridge, not a one-way bridge. Sometimes I think it's naivety. But at some point, that wears a bit thin, this kind of, well, he's been on a podcast or YouTube with
Tara
McCarthy, who was
yeah.
an actual eliminationist, genocidal neo-Nazi.
Yep, she advocates violence.
And I had never heard of her until I followed him onto her channel. And then I started getting recommendations from her. Now, if Jordan Peterson, he doesn't seem to even want to acknowledge that some people can go the other way. And there's sort of narcissism in thinking that he's the one who's going to save everyone, and it really pisses me off. And I don't really, there's not much. I don't think there's much to it. But
and when you put that out there, like his fans will say, like, so he can't talk to people like that he might disagree with. Doesn't mean that he agrees with everything that she says. Yeah, but you know what? If you're talking to a genocidal Nazi, maybe challenge them on that. He didn't do any of that. He just sat and bitched about leftists with her.
Well, yeah, exactly. And he would say that, he would say that I didn't know about her. Or he'd give some kind of lame, faux naivete.
Yeah.
So exactly as he would with the Pepe thing, exactly as he would with this guy. I don't know what he's going to say about this guy saying he's a proud Islamophobe. It gets more damning.
Yeah,
the thing.
Sooner or later he's going to be at a Klan rally and say, I was there to radicalize them.
That's the thing. Like, I think the argument around PewDiePie is a lot more difficult because people could perhaps make a compelling case that he is very unaware and that he's very unsavvy and that but I think that's, a function of his obsession with defeating YouTube. That's kind of like his whole thing. It's just being like the king of YouTube, and he's not too concerned about other things going on. Like, it's slightly sociopathic, and it's just like he's reacting to sort of terrible things, but he's not really doing anything to affect any change about them. Whereas Jordan Peterson, he's quite purposeful. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's an excuse, but it's context, I think.
But what is his purpose? His purpose at
this point, I think, is to maximize his income and
PewDiePie.
PewDiePie.
No, I was talking about Jordan. You said Jordan Peterson is very
Peterson
purposeful.
and PewDiePie they're both grifters. I don't know. I mean,
Definitely. Jordan Peterson is selling a lobster line of clothing now.
Yeah. I mean, and there's a thing that happens when you probably reach a particular level of fame. So I have this another one of my little armchair theories is just about this idea of how fame affects your personality. And I think that there have been studies that have shown that there's a kind of being famous is like cocaine, basically. And in itself, you're getting rewarded. Your brain is getting rewarded, especially online fame. You're getting rewarded from all this
instantaneous, right?
Yeah, you get all this like dopamine. It's I can't even imagine what it must be like if you're Trump, for instance, or you do a shit tweet and you kind of get rewarded and by just whatever crap comes onto your timeline. That's still attention,
Yeah.
And there's probably a certain megalomania that comes with that at a certain level, I think, and I think that
that's PewDiePie.
That's PewDiePie. I think that's Jordan Peterson. I think that's a lot of these people who are kind of influencers online. They kind of they're distorting. Something's been distorted here, and conventional arguments that they respond to. Yeah.
Today, somebody accused me of defending the authoritarian, totalitarian government of New Zealand, and I was like,
Jesus,
what?
Look out your window, man. I mean, what would you? I mean, it's like,
when was the last time like a political dissident was like shot by an anti-aircraft gun or something?
Okay, so here's something I just learned. Here's just something I just learned is that there are in the world, I think it's like 100, low hundreds of people who are seeking asylum from New Zealand, and exactly. I think a lot of them are these kinds of sort of Julian Assange wannabes going to Russia, I think, something like that. These kinds of people who are like the New Zealand Secret Service is on our case because we opened up the truth about chemtrails or something like that. And,
okay.
So we do have some kooks. That's good to hear.
The fact is that there is like 100 people claiming asylum from New Zealand. It's really quite funny. Yeah, I mean, maybe not funny. I don't know. But probably it's quite. Yeah, it's funny. I think it's funny.
No, well, I think that goes to show
haven't
that
seen any
the kinds of people that have been radicalized and gone insane do exist in this country. It's just we don't hear from them very often, and that's the scary thing. Is like looking around and wondering, what are people actually thinking in their private time? You don't know, because when you're going about your life, going to work, doing whatever you're doing, you're not hearing the fucked up shit that people actually think. Like, I'm sure there's people who actually are in this country and think, yeah, it is like North Korea. It is a caliphate.
Well, didn't like Dankula, the famous Nazi pug guy, say that it's like North Korea?
Yeah.
I'm remembering correctly, right? That's who said it.
Yeah.
Some guy who's never been to New Zealand has an opinion about New Zealand. Oh.
Talk to me about the caliphate of New Zealand,
Well, this interesting is
good for me because I'm a man, so I just get to roll. It's really nice.
I mean, in the days after this tragedy, because your prime minister draped a scarf over her head, there have been some anti-Islam activists,
some numbnuts who think that they're the end. But that's exactly the milieu that this terrorist falls into, is people who see quite relatively benign signifiers and use that to indicate that they have to take violent action. Because when you're saying that, when you're using buzzwords like surrender, invasion, these aren't just normal words to use in political discourse. These are calls to action. These are when you hear, if I hear my home's being invaded, well, I think the most intellectually honest thing for me to do would be to take up arms. And I feel this way about people who, I'm going to just go on a tiny little side, if I can just go off on a little tiny little tangent here. I feel this way about when people have the abortion argument. This idea that people talk about abortion as being a Holocaust, and I think that if they really believe that, they'd be doing a lot more action than they are, and the ones who are terrorists. And so when you're using this language, when you see online Jacinda Ardern respectfully wearing a scarf around her head for 2 hours at a memorial in a mosque, and you're saying this is when Western civilization surrendered to the caliphate, you're either being intellectually dishonest and you're just being a bullshit artist, or you actually believe that and you're a dangerous psychopath.
Invasion is the big word here. Like, for me, that is the number one word that indicates that it's not just criticism of Islam, that it's some sort of civilizational warfare that you have to protect yourself from. Like, somebody has to do something. We're being invaded, we're being replaced. And it's very strange to think that this tiny Muslim community in this country that's really out of the way, and it's just like this tiny fraction of the number of people living in Christchurch is an invasion. And that's when you know that it's not about criticizing the ideas. I think the thing about Islamophobia, the reason they say Islamophobia is fake is because they say you're criticizing the ideas. But I think what Islamophobia really means is that, Islam itself is a threat to all of us. So how can you say that Islam is a threat to all of us, but Muslims, they're okay? Don't worry about the Muslims.
Yeah,
that doesn't make sense.
As an ex-Muslim, I've wanted to be able to express my criticisms of Islam and not be shut down, So I understand the frustration when conservative Muslims use the term Islamophobia to protect themselves from any criticism, right? You'll take a verse from the Quran that's really, misogynistic or something, and, all Abrahamic scripture has it. But they'll be like, no, you can't say that. You're being Islamophobic. And it's like, no, fuck off. This verse sucks. So in that sense, it's a frustrating term because it seems to be, about Islam not being able to be criticized, right?
But I think the Islamophobia is that Muslims are infected with Islam. They've got a disease, which is Islam.
Well, no, yeah. So now I see that the hysteria around Islam itself is so excessive. It goes beyond any normal criticism of Islam. And trust me, I would I would be the last person to protect Islam from criticism, but the way that I see it now around me is alarming. You know, having all these other prominent ex-Muslims say shit like Islam is worse than Nazism, and then you tell them that is incredibly dangerous a comparison to popularize right now. And they're why? We didn't
killed
say
the
anything.
Nazis. We killed them.
Yes, and they will follow it up with saying, well, Nazism has been defeated, but Islam is still around, you know? And then you're like, but what the fuck are you saying? And they're like, why?
There's a war.
We haven't said anything about Muslims. We're just saying Islam is worse than Nazism. We're not calling Muslims Nazis. And it's like, no, you're just saying the ideology that they practice is Nazism. What does that make them?
That's like saying the problem is Nazism, not Nazis. Okay. It's like Nazis are fine.
It's absurd. They tie themselves into knots and they don't realize how dangerous it is, even in the wake of things like this, right? So I've been trying to point out, like, the kinds of toxic shit that I've seen in the ex-Muslim scene, in the atheist rational skeptic scene, in the IDW, which gets a lot more, you know, mainstream credibility. You know, this replacement theory, like, I've seen excerpts from Sam Harris that say stuff like, you know, the Muslim birth rates are ominous and they're going to be the so-and-so percent by this year, and that's if you stop immigration today. And it's like, what the fuck? This is not criticism of Islam. You're now getting into immigration and replacement and all of that, right?
There's someone I follow. His name's called David Nywart. I'm going to get in trouble if I pronounce his name incorrectly, but he's written 2 really good books. One's called The Eliminationist, which I think was around 2008 he wrote it. And then last year he came out with a book. Well, it was 2017. He came out with a book called Alt America. He researches the alt-right, or the far right in America, the militia movement, and so on and so forth. And it's quite interesting. So he was the one who sort of brought this term eliminationism into discourse, and it's this idea of, in Rwanda, when there's a genocide, what's been playing on the radio, what's the kind of rhetoric that's been playing. It's about enabling people, giving people almost sort of cover to think a certain way. Because if there's a kind of if you can wrap yourself in a bubble where it's permissible, and you believe that that you're at war and you have permission to, you know, cut people's arms off or whatever, you'll do it. You know, like,
when you dehumanize people to such a degree, then, I mean, these kinds of things can happen.
Absolutely, and this guy who attacked our country, he has wrapped himself in this eliminationist discourse
and stuff that we've seen. That's, you know, we're so familiar with all over YouTube.
We're all kind of familiar with it. Like we've all seen it.
Didn't, like, Lauren Southern have a video called The Great Replacement, which she deleted all of a sudden? And Jordan Peterson, I heard, you know, that photo that you were describing, also his, like, promoters or whoever
Emery Hold,
deleted that photo, but then people had it, like, archived.
I wonder what happened with Southern, because she's a grifter, in my humble opinion. Like, she doesn't. I actually think that there's I think there are people who are true believers, and I don't think she's a true believer. I think she's someone who just says it because it's red meat and gets her the views, and thus whatever she gets out of it. And I'm interested to see what her next move is, because the terrorists' manifesto was named The Great Replacement. It wasn't the Great Replacement was the name of one of her videos, but it comes from there's some kind of quote unquote intellectual history to this term, The Great Replacement. She didn't invent it, is what I'm saying, but she certainly popularized it. And I think that, and she obviously removed that from her YouTube channel the day it happened, and obviously it was to circumvent YouTube from giving her a strike or whatever. But I'm actually quite curious. How is she going to just carry on with this this kind of this usual inciting rhetoric? Do you think so? Or do you think
yes, because she did it. She did a tweet where she basically said, you know, just because all of this shit has happened doesn't mean we can't criticize Islam. We have to be able to criticize Islam.
Went down like a cup of sick, though, didn't it? That went down like a cup of sick, and I think that.
But a lot of people have been
she
tweeting
appeals
that.
to people who love cups of sick. Like that's her audience.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
They crave the sick.
But it's okay. So here's the point that I want to drive home: is like it's not just people as extreme as Lawrence Southern, and she's not even extreme among the extreme people.
No, she's not that.
But,
I mean, she just seems like again, that whole proximity to it. You have.
But there's like a lot of people that are just known as secularist humanists or whatever. They've also been like obsessively tweeting about how we should still continue to criticize Islam. And you know what? I don't think that Islam should be protected from criticism. I just think that there's a time and a place, right? This is just not the time to be making that point. It comes across very insensitive and a strange thing to keep saying right now, right?
Actually, I know we had kind of an exchange, or just very small exchange, about the fact that a school in New Zealand recently, they restated or they just confirmed
that their school rules against the hijab will continue, right? Yeah, and I think we have differing opinions on this, so let's talk about it. It's like an Anglican school, I believe, that doesn't allow religious symbols, only like small necklaces or something to be worn inside the shirts, and so it doesn't allow hijab to be worn, and they've just said that yes, that is still the case.
But for me, that's exactly what you're saying. That's just time and place.
No.
There's not necessarily anything wrong with saying. I don't know. Is there something wrong with saying that? Like, what's your case? Okay,
so my case is this: if they had just made it a new rule after the attack that you know what, hijabs are not allowed, then that'd be like a douche move.
But why aren't they allowed? Like, why can't you have a hijab?
Because they're an Anglican school, I guess.
Well, schools have uniforms. I mean, I went to a school that didn't allow nail polish at one point. I wasn't happy about that.
I get it. And the Anglican schools here, as far as I'm aware, they're not like the UK Anglican schools where they're funded by the government and there's a certain kind of statutory requirements and all sorts of stuff involved. Here, they're purely church schools, and if you want to send your kids to one, then the chances are you're an Anglican. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I don't know enough about it, but I would think that this is something which is. I think it was in response to people wearing scarves out of solidarity, and that's a whole other debate which I'm not really equipped for, but I do know that. Just wearing a scarf as a signifier for a cause isn't enough to change a dress rule for us. I
think I was all prepared.
Poppies is another one. You shouldn't have to wear poppies, and I don't get why that's a big deal.
I was prepared to defend that rule, but then I was just thinking about it, why can't you wear a hijab, or at the school that you went to, why couldn't you wear nail polish? And I just came up blank. Why? Is it just they're scared of something or something?
That's just school.
Yeah,
that's just
at
schools,
one
mate.
point my sister.
What do they think's going to happen?
At one point, my sister had a principal,
and then you weren't allowed to have long hair. It was just the weirdest.
It's so conflicting.
Yeah, they had 1 year. They had a rule where your hair wasn't allowed to be too short for men because that would make you a skinhead. And then people grew their hair long, and you became like some fucking grunge.
I think that there's a line. There's a line if it's actually making people uncomfortable and feel unsafe, because it's whatever you're wearing or expressing is kind of threatening, and it just makes us all feel very uncomfortable. I'd get that, but if it's just nail polish, I actually don't know how to defend saying it's banned. It's just that we have certain rules and we want it to be orderly or something like that.
Yes, that's exactly what it is, and I'm not defending it. I'm just saying that schools have rules like that, right? At one year, my sister had a principal that allowed, I think, vertical stripes, but not horizontal stripes. I don't know what the hell that was about.
It's hilarious.
It's so stupid. All the students made fun of it.
But that's the thing. I guess we're defending.
But what I'm saying is, it's not necessarily coming from a place of anti-Muslim bigotry. You know what I mean?
But it's that school has the right to express itself that it doesn't want hijabs or whatever. It's the school is making a statement that hijabs can't be worn by people. Whatever. And I have to say, I do actually have some sort of a problem with the fact that at a certain age, parents will put a hijab on a child.
Of course, yeah.
That's kind of odd, but then the kid goes to school and the school is like, no hijab. To me, that the school part of that is a little bit questionable. Like, I don't know what they're aiming for. I don't know why they have a problem with it, I guess. But you're just saying that they should have the right to say, we've got an issue with you wearing a hijab at school. I mean, I would question the parents. I'd be like, maybe you shouldn't force that onto your child.
Yeah, but how can the school question the parents? You know what I mean? If they just have a rule where there's no hijabs and they don't have to try to convince parents not to do that.
I think that it was in response to this. Today was a day of solidarity, and a lot of New Zealand women have been wearing headscarves, and there's been a lot of interesting debate about that.
Yeah, I mean, I cringe at that. I understand it's a very sweet gesture of solidarity, and it's coming from a really good place and all of that. And of course, I'm not gonna be like, oh, New Zealand has fallen to Sharia law or the caliphate or whatever. But just as a woman who grew up in Saudi, who was made by the state to wear a headscarf, I cringe when I see that as a
there's so many different experiences of the hijab, I can imagine, or of it, that you can't. I guess part of the sort of as I would see it, and I guess my privilege as a man in the culture that I'm in is that I don't really care one way or another. But it's not really something which I have to think about. When but the way I see it, I think to myself, well, if you by your choice of a certain scarf around your head in a certain way, that's more than just expressing solidarity. That is wearing your scarf in a certain, it maybe aligns with a certain denomination of Islam, or a certain region.
Not denomination, but certain level of orthodoxy.
Right, exactly. Okay, that's the right term. Yes, orthodoxy. So you think that it kind of, by doing that, what you're actually doing is you're doing two things. You're not necessarily subscribing to that orthodoxy, but you're kind of appropriating. I don't know. It doesn't. You're right. It's a bit cringe. It's a bit weird.
But then again, time and place, right? I might not love it, but I'm not going to be attacking people for showing solidarity in that way after an attack like this, because I'm like, they mean
and
well.
I guess, and Muslim people in New Zealand have been divided themselves. So there's been some Muslim people who have been saying that their heart can't express how wonderful it is to see that level of solidarity. And where it actually originated, this idea, was because within Christchurch there was a school whose children's were their families at the school were directly affected by this tragedy, and the mothers were afraid to start walking their children to school. And as a measure of solidarity, teachers and other parents use the scarf as a gesture that they could walk them to school with that on. And that grew from there. So I think very, very quickly it was this idea, okay, so this is a very good thing to express solidarity. But on that very neighborhood level, I think that's a very beautiful thing.
Which is understandable, right? Like when it becomes a symbol of defiance, right, in the West, because anti-Muslims target visibly Muslim women all the time, it's almost understandable that people would defiantly wear it more.
To stigmatize it.
And
there are people who have. There was a woman on the news who said she was exposed to Islamophobic or racist verbal abuse on the train, and and just to see women visibly wearing the scarf, that meant a lot to her.
Right.
There's this idea that she wasn't isolated, because when you are grace visibility for a minority means greater vulnerability, and so there is another side to this debate.
So when it comes to the hijab, though, right, there's so many nuances to this conversation, which the people who say either you're submitting to Muslims or you're not just don't understand. And even as a woman who dislikes the hijab, I can appreciate the gesture. I can appreciate that, when people, visibly Muslim women, are scared, that an increase in number of women that are putting the headscarf on is like this defiant act that makes them feel safer to walk to school or whatever. So I can understand those things. And yeah, I mean, this is a complex debate, complex discussion.
I can't speak to your experience, obviously, but for you, is it like, the people who don't want to wear the headscarf, it's like they've been pressured into wearing the headscarf from a very early age, and the way that they more experience it is like something that they've been told that they have to do, and, they've come to a point where it's like they don't want to do that. So, it more represents being controlled.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for everyone, obviously, but what I've usually seen is that even if you grow up thinking it, like you see your parent, your mom, or your sister wearing it, and then you're told that this is just normal, this is how Muslim girls are supposed to be, even if you're not like pressured, obviously, it kind of is. There is a pressure, right, of family and societal expectations that you don't want to disappoint or go against. So
this could be my ignorance, but isn't there like a certain age where they say like, okay, the child is now ready to wear the hijab?
Not always, but yes. I mean, the idea is that after puberty is
right
when they're ready, but it's not like a hard and fast rule that everyone follows.
So what is your reason for not liking the hijab then? Like, is it different than that? Like, it's not that reason.
Well, my reason for not liking it is just the origin of why it's worn, right? It's a very sexist garment, I feel. Firstly, it's just for women. You have to cover your hair so that you don't invoke lust in men, right? That's the basic reason that it exists. That's why you're supposed to cover yourself. But
well, for me, I think it should be about choice. Like, if somebody wants to say, I should be modest and I should cover myself up, then I feel like, go crazy, like, do your thing.
Well, yeah, no, I'm not saying that I have the right to stop anyone from wearing it, but I can still dislike it. If you think that you should be modest because your hair is going to turn men on, and it's your responsibility to cover it up so that they aren't turned on, I think that's a very fucked up mentality. So
I think that, that could be some of the criticisms, like in terms of privilege and everything that people are talking about going on in New Zealand. Like, it could partly be to do with that. But I just think, as Nick was saying, that I think it like misses the solidarity that it's representing at the moment.
Right. So I just want to add that it's not quite as simple as that. That is one core reason that the hijab exists. But now in the post 9/11 world, where Muslims are, demonized, there's so many reasons that people wear them. It's not just for that. Some people wear it, for cultural reasons. Some people wear it for political reasons, like they want to be defiant in the face of anti-Muslims, Muslim women wearing hijabs increased so much after 9/11. So it's not that someone is literally
it's a statement of identity.
Exactly. So it's not literally someone saying, I should cover myself to be modest. It's not always that anymore. So we have to understand that there are different reasons.
Well, I think I sound like a completely cornball, like libertarian, whatever, but I just want it to be about choice, really. I just want people to wear what they want to wear, which is obviously kind of idealistic and naive because parents are always telling kids what to do and how to conform. But, if somebody says, I don't want to wear a hijab, I'm not going to be like, well, I'm disappointed. Like, you really should wear that hijab. Like, it's their choice. They can do what they want to do. But I guess for me, like, the conversation is sometimes about the pressure that people might feel to wear it. And I can totally understand how for some women who like raised in, Islamic households, that could be a very big issue for them. People raised in, conservative religion who want to break away from that. I really respect that, I think.
Yeah, and it's also about the privilege of Western hijabis too, right? A lot of women over here have the choice whether to wear it or not wear it, whereas a lot of women back in the Middle East don't have that choice. So then the women with the choice are perpetuating this practice that has been used to oppress women?
Well, I've been to Iran. I'll tell you a story about Iran. Is that there's this? I've done Tinder in Iran, and
Wow.
oh no, let me tell you. Oh God, I won't tell you. But there is a. It's interesting because there's a very indoor Iran and an outdoor Iran.
Yeah, just like Saudi.
Yeah, exactly. And it's and when you look at, I'm going to encourage everyone to check out Tinder. But like, it's funny when you go through the photos, you'll see that there is a look, which is obviously the dress up look, and then there's a dress down look. Do you know? Mm-hmm. And I don't think we necessarily see that from our vantage point if we don't exist within that world. We don't see that. We don't see that there. You know, if you're someone like this piece of shit who's talking about the end of Western civilization because he sees a hijab, he doesn't necessarily see the nuance. Do you know?
Mm-hmm. And also, there are some progressive women that are hijab wearers, right? With progressive politics, this assumption that they're Islamist because they wear a hijab is really disgusting.
Absolutely, and I think that I think that's actually something which I think that's one of the I guess myths which I've probably fallen prone to myself. Like I would maybe presume because it's a lot of my time I spent more than a decade living in London, and I think part of what if you have any British listeners, they might care to disagree with me, but I think one of the things which really bothers a lot of British people about the hijab is that it's a physical manifestation of faith, and faith is a very private thing for a lot of British people, and they probably wouldn't mind it so much as if people just kept it to themselves. Do you know?
Well, I kind of understand that, to be honest. And here's the position that I'm in as an ex-Muslim who really enjoys criticizing Islam when it's fair criticism. It sucks to be in this anti-Muslim climate and be on the defensive all the time and having to be the person that
you have all the dickheads on your
mugger.
side, right? You have all the people on your side who are like, you know, there's a lot of things which are actually, I think, things like I looked at that guy who had "I'm a proud Islamophobe" on his T-shirt. He has this list of perceived, I guess, cultural traits of Muslims.
Right, and it's like ridiculous stuff like pedophilia and...
Yeah. But I mean, that isn't to say that honor killing doesn't happen, and, you know...
yes.
You know, right. And so how do you create a space for that sort of dialogue without having a jerk-off? Without having a jerk-off like this stepping in and distorting the debate.
Exactly,
you know?
exactly.
It's a challenge. It's a real challenge, eh?
Yep.
Yeah.
So just to wrap things up, I just wanted to talk about the, it's just memes, LOL, and the role of plausible deniability in all of this. What do you guys think about the hand gesture, the OK sign, and as we were talking about, subscribe to PewDiePie?
Yeah. So
it's the whole plausible deniability aspect that's this common thread.
I have a upcoming video which I'm trying to make, so I'm plugging that right now on my YouTube channel, and it's about radicalization, I guess. And one of the things which I came across quite interestingly was a podcast between two actual bona fide neo-Nazis, actual hard right white supremacists. We're not talking about the Kermit the Frog voiced Canadian types. We're talking about the
ones that teach at universities.
Yeah, we're talking about the ones who actually openly talk about genocide. And it was there was a really interesting thing that they started talking about, and it was this idea of memeing and irony and lols. And they were saying they know that there is this kind of Trojan horse. Well, obviously they do. I mean, why wouldn't they? But that what they were speculating about was how much time they have left before their jokes about ovens and their, those sorts of edgy memes. They know that a lot of kids are doing them just for the memes, and they've got that cover. But that's going to run its course sooner or later, and they're going to be a bit more sort of bare. Left out in the open, and it's interesting to hear genocidal white supremacists actually openly speculating about how much that this is a thing, and also how far they can ride it. So I thought that was actually, for me, that was interesting confirmation that it is a phenomenon. This idea of ironic
Nazism.
Yeah, ironic Nazism. That there are some people out there who are just doing it for the lols. Some of these people who become sort of white nationalists on YouTube. Well, obviously. Baked Alaska is the obviously egregious example of this. The guy doesn't have a thought in his head, but he knows what people respond to, and people are responding to this. And he's doing lols Nazism.
But that's the thing, right? So if you do the okay hand gesture for lols or whatever, and people say, well, you're being an idiot when you think it's a white supremacist hand gesture, but then you get like actual white supremacists like Richard Spencer or this guy who shot up 50 people, and then he did it in handcuffs. There's a picture of him flashing that symbol, right?
Oh, and beyond that, he was, this is quite a shocking thing to say. He was memeing while he was killing people. So, I'm unfortunate enough to have watched some of this.
Oh, God.
And just on the by, this footage has reached a lot of people. The local school where I live.
A school?
No. There's a school where I live. They took everyone's Chromebooks and they found this footage on 45% of them. So this is something that's actually being disseminated. It's been disseminated, and what's really, there's a lot of people who are working through a lot of trauma here, but what's interesting, I myself am. I've had to talk to someone. It's actually been quite horrific. Really, I have Besides all that. One thing I saw in the footage was he was doing the stuff he was saying, the stuff he was playing music, and he played this what was the song? So apparently it's the Remove Kebab song. And
I have no idea what that is.
No, this is where you're in that level of meme aptitude where it's in another language which I don't understand.
Yeah.
But I have since discovered that this is a song which sort of that it's a bit of lulls on their side. But can you imagine being murdered for the lulls? Is essentially what that was. That during that time, during that 17 minutes of mayhem, he was lulzing. I can't even imagine.
We live in hell world, I did an episode on fascist fashion with ContraPoints. I think it was last year or maybe late 2017. And we talked about, emoji Nazism, ironic Nazism, and, the potential for like lol jihad. If they have LOL Nazism, then what if Islamist culture starts to mimic this stuff, right?
Well, yeah, but also furthermore,
and now we're seeing like someone who's murdered people for the lols,
and that's
horrific.
It's horrific, and the thing about this. So what's interesting? You should say that is a loss of. I'm pretty. I don't know if it's. I can't say for certain, but I'm pretty sure if you were to look at a lot of ISIS activity, early ISIS activity, I'm pretty sure that there will be a lot of similarities with what's happening here, and I think that it's not just there is an interplay. Do you know?
I've got a pet theory that I've seen no one else saying, and which I have not yet said. I don't know.
Don't worry, I'll steal it.
If anyone else thinks this, but his body cam looked like a first-person shooter, like the way.
I have heard people say that. Yeah.
Okay. And it made me think of like Fortnite. Everybody plays Fortnite, but I don't know. It's Fortnite third person, so maybe it's more like Call of Duty.
I don't know what
Call of Duty Blackout or something like that. Like it was basically he was trying to make it look like a first-person shooter in order just to sort of say like, hey kids, like this is not really real killing. This is just like a game. It's like a simulation.
He was having a gaming moment, a heist gaming moment.
That's terrifying.
But actually, like he was recreating like what a first-person shooter looks like.
Yeah, no,
and I think that is the kind of language that the youth speaks today. Like everyone knows like Fortnite, or even just it's probably like too saccharine, but more like Minecraft or something, like moving around in a first-person perspective with weaponry. It's like just a very common image. Like everybody has seen that. They know. Yeah. So when he's like shooting people, it's kind of like you can see it. Like if you were a child and you were looking at it, you'd probably relate it to like Call of Duty or Fortnite or like some sort of game. So I
And
think
it's a way
his,
to kind of
his-
detach yourself from the experience too. Like, it's not really happening. It's a video game. Dehumanize these people that you're murdering.
That's a good
That's- yeah,
point.
it's a-
You're
it's a
actually
further
turning
level
these
of
people into
dehumanization.
avatars. It's turned people into sprites.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, and that was kind of the only way to help me through it in a way. Like, so, Jesus, don't watch this footage if you I mean, don't
No,
even
I
be
don't
curious
plan
about
on
it.
it.
It is just the worst thing
But
you've
I
ever
think
seen.
that's his way of encouraging
seen-
copycats.
okay.
His way of encouraging copycats is to make it seem not real, like it's something that you could just go out and do, like it's just, like it's a simulation.
And
it's
Nick,
not real life.
didn't you post about, was it an insulation guy who was in court because he
This
was
is what's interesting
spreading
about how-
the video,
The-
and
the
also
court
he was
cases,
charging.
yeah.
He was charging $14.88,
Yeah, so what's
$14.88 per
happening-
square foot or something
what's
ridiculous
happening
like that.
What's happening here is that the police. I don't know all the dynamics. Like in all of these events, there's a few questions that haven't yet been answered. One of them, the people on the ground certainly acted very proficiently. Like, they caught the guy alive within 6 minutes, apparently, within 6 minutes of receiving the call. But the other thing that they've fucked up in several other ways, and one of the ways was they charged they've charged him for one murder, but they mistakenly charged him for the murder of an alive person, and they had to. I mean, what the fuck was that about? I don't know. That just kind of shows that there's a bit of chaos happening. Then, the other thing is the gun licensing is that I suspect the reason the police. This is my personal, I guess, partisan perspective here, is that the police. The part of the reason that they are supporting this semi-automatic gun ban that's going through is because that's a lot easier than for them to talk about the fact that their licensing system has been gamed for so long. And this terrorist, when he got his license, this is something which I've heard from a gun control person, was that he applied for his license. In this country, you need to get 2 references and a home visit to receive a gun license, a weapon license, firearm license. This terrorist, he didn't receive a home interview, and the 2 references he gave were from people from internet forums, which means that there's something broken there.
Yeah.
So that's not. And also that might give you a clue as to why the police, New Zealand police, I don't know if it was this forum, but I suspect that's why they're talking to Kiwi farms. Now, or they're trying to get the logs of Kiwi farms. Now, leaving all that aside, the police are trying to obviously kind of show who's in charge, They want to sort of at least show that they're in control of the situation. So they are sort of dragging up, that they're doing this sort of dragness of
They're like
participants.
making examples of people, right?
Yeah. So because Christchurch has a peculiar history. It's a very white part of New Zealand. It's very their local rugby team is called the Crusaders.
Jeez. And they're considering a name change now, I read, right?
They are considering a name change.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like, I've never thought about their name ever. Like, even when I see all this talk of Crusade online, never thought about the name.
When you grow up with
Crusaders.
something, it just kind of seems normal, and you don't even think about it sometimes,
Yeah, I was
right?
like, oh, wait, yeah, they are called the Crusaders.
Yeah.
That's right.
But just if we can just sort of just. I'm sorry, I'm just going to. I feel like I've just interrupted everyone all the way through, but I was just you asking about this guy who had 1488 as his van. So there is a particular history in Christchurch of far right activity, and they were caught. And this terrorist attack might not be related to any of that, but it's definitely not a good look for the people of Christchurch. And so the police certainly, they found a few people. Like there was this guy. He was a tradesman. He had Nazi memes on his van. This has been going around Christchurch for years. No one ever batted an eyelid. And now they raided his home. They recovered his hard drive. Found he had shared this footage. And that's as good as in the law of this country. That's as good as sharing child porn or something. it's a harmful material, So he's looking at a few years in prison. And so there are a few people who have been arrested. Sorry, that was just my point.
But didn't he shared it in the context of promoting it? Like he was saying, "Wow, look at this."
Yeah.
No. He'd also sent severed pigs heads to that mosque 2 years ago.
Yeah, like he wasn't just sharing it like
no,
news.
No.
Like, wow, I can't believe this. This is shocking. He was saying like, look at this. Wow, this is like really interesting. Like this is sort of where we should be going.
But he's a very good, egregious person to round up to kind of show the people of our country that
there's more of them. There's a teenager. There's a guy who's 18.
Yeah. There's a few trolls here and there. What I'm trying to say is that they're trying to at least look like that. Everyone's making gestures. Is what I'm saying. So you have like our bookshop. As we talked about earlier, that was their gesture. This is the police's gesture. Everyone has. There's a sense of people trying to clear house or maybe quote unquote clean their rooms.
Just to go back to when we were talking about the internet as a continent, I read a story about how a thread on 4chan led to school closures across Charlottesville yesterday because there was a user claiming to be a student who said that they were going to commit ethnic cleansing. And then in Birmingham, 5 mosques were attacked with a sledgehammer. I don't know. I think they just defaced the building or something. I don't think they harmed anyone. But, I mean, it seems like these little incidents are cropping up all over the place. All right. So any final thoughts?
I hope that anyone who listens to this can forgive all my interjections and, all good.
My final thought on this is just that, like, anti-social justice YouTube has really gone in the direction of white supremacy, and it's not a good guy to bring up, but I think it's encapsulated in somebody like Andy Warski, who basically was an anti-feminist, anti-social justice YouTuber until at a certain point he was like, I'm getting bored of this. I don't want to talk about this stuff anymore. So I'm going to have on a biologist and we're going to talk about IQ and we're going to talk about demographics. And we're going to talk about
some crack.
all of the things happening to white people and why white people are superior and why we have to actually, be concerned about the civilizational war. And for me, that was just a marker of the fact that anti-feminism and anti-social justice have no defense or no way of actually fighting back against the alt-right and white supremacy, and that there was creators who went in the direction of actually enabling that and promoting it on their channels. And then there was people who were basically like, I agree with everything that they say, but I have like slightly different values about, how a government should be run or like taxation or something like that, So I just think that the issue is that everyone has gone into memery and shitloadism, and
that has real world consequences.
With absolutely no self-reflection, no self-examination. Yeah.
They've basically said to the alt-right, like, our platforms are your platforms.
Yeah.
Come on, say whatever you want to say, do what you want to do, and then we'll say that we tried by meeting you face-to-face or talking to you via voice. That's all we had to do to prove that we don't agree with you, but we will give you a platform. Yeah, the lack of challenge.
The lack of challenge, but that comes from, I guess, agreeing with a lot of the talking points, right?
Yeah, it's just like, I think we should have a republic, even though you're totally right about all that shit about black people.
Yeah. So do you think that far right and white supremacist terrorism is being recognized properly for the threat that it is, or even on social media platforms?
No, hell no.
No.
I mean, we could spend all night talking about this, to be honest. There's this idea that we haven't even got into how culpable the social media companies are in it.
Yeah, there's so much to talk about. But
there's so much to talk about. But there is this idea in my head, at least, and I'm sure it's exactly what Tim was saying just then, about how there is a certain drift. When you are making content online, let's say YouTube specifically, because that's what we're familiar with, what Tim and I are familiar with, you've got to keep making content to stay relevant. And when you run out of ideas, you've got to you got to say stuff. And, well, what better thing to say than, I don't know, a bit of, edgy shit. And that gets you the engagement. And then sooner or later you're spouting nonsense that, like, you don't even know the consequences of until the consequences happen. And then you have to extricate yourself. And that's like what I think a lot of people are doing. And some of them have just fallen so far down that rabbit hole. They just like certain YouTubers who I've been looking at, they are so far down that rabbit hole, they probably can't get out of it. They are radicalized, and while others are like, oh, that was a mistake, and they're trying to pretend nothing ever happened.
Right.
And I think that's quite interesting.
Right. I mean, YouTube radicalization, internet radicalization is so real, and I can't believe there's still people out there that deny that it's a thing. I mean, as Tim was saying, there's a funneling from like more mainstream content to further and further fringe, more and more extreme content. And it's about time that people recognize that white supremacist radicalization is a thing, white supremacist terrorism is a thing, and it's a problem, So, I think that's a good place to end. Thank you guys for chatting with me about this.
It was fun.
So I can spread my message.
Right.
And just everyone can come
Spread
under my
your
thrall.
SJW message.
Well, there is one thing that I forgot, which is that, Richard Spencer, like a year or two ago, was basically like the alt-right are completely fucked. Like, no one will have us on anywhere. We're completely screwed. Like, the Antifa's efforts to deplatform us have totally destroyed us.
He was outright saying that, eh? He
was like, we're done. We're basically screwed. When Andy Warski turned his whole platform into basically alt-right radio, he was like, we've got another chance. Like, he said YouTube is the new frontier for the alt-right. And I think that time has proven him correct about that. It was basically like, he's defeated, and then all of a sudden he had this just ray of hope, and it just came through, and now that's where we are now. And
that's the story of every single discredited idea from the last, let's say, 100 years has had a social media platform that it's almost like a little ember that was just burning away, and it's been given oxygen and whipped up into a sort of and all of a sudden people are talking about fucking phrenology and shit,
Right.
Like,
I could never have imagined this like 3-4 years ago. I can't believe how far backwards we've gone in these past couple of years. It's terrifying.
But I do think it's interesting that he was saying that we're defeated, and then it was like YouTube was like, no, you're not. Come along, like come to us. We will
some
help
monetization.
Exactly. And now they're like,
have some recommendations.
We're not very visible, but at least we're very influential in the underground of the internet, and we're actually having real world impacts. So, I mean, at the end of the day, the alt-right has kind of succeeded in a strange way.
But I hope that from incidents like this, we can learn and grow and learn how to handle these things better, right? I hope people talk about it responsibly, and I guess if they felt that they were kind of heading in that direction, I hope that people start to pull away. So maybe this is a wake-up call for everyone.
I think that like overseas people don't have that feeling that we are having at the moment.
Of course.
And we sort of like, so while we're having all this kind of interesting, introspective stuff about New Zealand society and gun control, they're just looking at it from a completely different perspective. But it'd be interesting to see if it changes anything. So.
All right, well, guys, nice chatting with you. And hopefully we'll chat again about a happier topic. Sometime.
Yes, let's stay cool, yeah?
Yeah, take care, Nick.
Thanks for having me on. Also, I forgot that I've got a new podcast with Dusty Smith and Vadim Newquist called The Gotcha Boys. We're going into our third episode, and our third episode is probably going to be based around criticizing and making fun of white supremacy. So that's probably quite relevant to what we've been talking about today. Yeah.
Definitely, everyone check that out.
The Gotcha Boys.
Yeah, I'll add a link in the show notes. All right.
Aroha to everybody.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Polite Conversations. You can support this podcast by sharing the shit out of it, making some noise about it, or contributing via Patreon. Patreon.com/Nice Mangoes. No E in Mangoes. Also, you can follow me on Twitter @Nice Mangoes. If you want to make a one-time donation instead of a monthly Patreon one, you can do so via PayPal, nicemangoes.blog@gmail.com. Remember, no E in mangoes. If you've got an interesting story and would potentially like to be a guest, you can email me there too.